Alright, a little preface before we start the review. The original still wears the crown, but as far as remakes, reboots, and remasters go, this one's pretty damn good. To say this new take on an underrated classic was completely unexpected would be a massive understatement. In some ways, it's on the same level of surprise spontaneity as 2013's DuckTales Remastered. If there's one thing that remains entirely intact here, it's the game's original fun factor and level design. Each area of the game still feels incredibly fun to play through, thanks to great platforming and a fair challenge that never feels too overwhelming. Golden spatulas and shiny objects are still your main goals, but beyond that you're free to explore every level to its fullest. I would go into the story, but this game has been out for well over a decade, and this would technically be my third time reviewing it. So go look up one of my older videos, preferably my revisited one, if you want to know more about the story. Our three main characters play exactly as they did in the 2003 original. Aside from some new animations and some clearly re-recorded dialogue, this is essentially the same game we grew up on. SpongeBob is the Swiss Army knife of the team, and the one with the most abilities. He's integral for getting through most of the story-based missions, and he usually ends up doing most of the heavy lifting. But an arsenal of bubble-based weapons keeps most tasks from ever getting stale, and each new addition only adds to the fun factor. Patrick still plays exactly like he did before, and there's not much to say about him other than he can lift and throw several objects, even robots. And he's the only one other than SpongeBob who can ground pound. It would have been nice had the developers decided to recycle some of his better moves from the movie video game, like his cartwheel to speed things up a bit, or his ability to ricochet projectiles back at other enemies. But alas, this is the same Patrick, barnacles and all. Seeing how this is my third time reviewing the game, I have no problem going on record for a third time stating that Sandy is still the best character in the game. She can wipe out most enemies with quick karate chops or a tight tug of her indestructible lasso. The only ones that put up a challenge are the sleepy time robots, but for the most part she's a total badass and a force to be reckoned with. Her lasso gliding makes her the character of choice for most scenarios, even for some SpongeBob specific missions. And she's also my go-to character for most of the sliding levels, especially the super addicting slopes of Sand Mountain. The game's design is either going to be hit or miss for fans of the original. Personally, I think it's a major hit. The game's graphics and character design seem like a hybrid of the original Battle for Bikini Bottom and Revenge of the Flying Dutchman. Another great 3D platformer that has sadly been overlooked and forgotten for far too long. The game's 9 different areas are still a blast to play through, and OG fans will definitely be able to find some cute little references and Easter eggs littered throughout the game's many stages. But for the most part, these are the same levels showcasing the original, just with a new coat of paint. The challenge seems to be the same, just with a few tweaks in some areas. It's probably just the designer's way of letting us know that this game won't always be a cakewalk, even if you've already played it before. And that same catchy music from the original makes a return as well. No need to hire a band or do any unneeded remixes for this one. The soundtrack here is just as classic as the game it belongs to. As far as complaints go, I've got a few that I felt were worth mentioning. First off, when fighting some of the bosses, your hit detection feels a little bit off, like I should be hitting them but for some reason I can't. Almost like the game chooses when I can and can't inflict boss damage. Not to mention that your own hitbox is a little hard to discern, especially during that final boss when jumping is key. Sometimes you can dodge and sometimes you can't. Don't know whether to credit this to some misplaced jumps or improper testing. Also, the Bubble Bowl move feels like a definite downgrade from the original. I love how in the original it looked like an actual bowling ball, but now it looks like a tiny little sud. Why did this need to be changed again? And my final piece of criticism has to do with the new Mermaid Man slide featured at the end of the Kelp Forest. It's terrible. Aside from being a completely unnecessary change from the original, it's also insanely difficult and ridiculously cheap. Most of the slide requires you to make sharp turns or to quickly corkscrew your way up or down a series of vines. This nearly breaks the game because your characters were never designed to turn around tight spaces. Take any slide-based level in the game. Most of them have turns, but they're usually wide enough, giving you just enough time to curve your way around them. Here, You're jumping around everywhere trying to reorient yourself while also trying not to fall off and die. Telltale signs of a level that was never fully tested or played out. But those minor quibbles aside, Battle for Bikini Bottom still remains a classic platformer for the ages. It's proof that you don't need an impressive, decade-spanning resume to make a great game that anyone can have fun with. I love this game as a 5th grader, I loved it as a recent high school graduate, and I love it just as much today. Even without the nostalgia factor, it's still a great time for anyone with even the famous interest in old school 3D platformers. Even if this is the only one of the original 3 SpongeBobs to get the HD treatment, it's more than enough to satisfy a day one SpongeBob fan, and a veteran of the old days of gaming, when there was nothing more important than wondering when it was going to be Friday, when was I going to play my games, and when was my mom going to order pizza. It's a great game for newcomers and a DeLorean ride back for olds like me. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe.